Welcome to the closing session of this year's University Global Coalition annual gathering. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I am Ángel Cabrera. I'm the president of Georgia Tech in Atlanta, in Georgia, and I'm the current chair of the steering committee of the University Global Coalition, which is organizing this gathering. And I want to begin this closing session, much like we kicked off the week, with some very important thank yous. First, I want to thank everybody attending this session and all the sessions throughout the week. Your questions, your passion, your thoughts that you've shared have made this a much richer experience for everybody. And if your university is not already a member of the Global Coalition, we'd encourage you to talk to your university president and encourage them to join, and we'll share some information in the chat on how to do that. Second, of course, our panelists and speakers who have joined us this week and share their experiences with us. We are grateful for their time, their dedication to the overarching goal of sustainable development. And finally, all the organizers behind the scenes who have put in many hours to create the event. My colleagues at the Georgia Tech Research Institute who provided the communications support. We thank the team for their creativity and flexibility in providing this service this week. The staff at Georgia Tech, Primus Moore, Sam Karanja, and my colleague Drew Cutright, who've been really the architect of these sessions. And to all the UGC conference committee, Aphrodite Anastasaki of Unitar, Stefano Battilosi and Silvia Galard Paramon of Carlos III de Madrid, Sally Cremens of SUNY, Demi Disu of Carnegie Mellon in Africa, Luis Guillen of Earth University, Emin Mavi of Koch University, Joanna Rogulska of UC Davis, and Paula Visconti Arizpe del Tecnológico de Monterrey, and of course, our committee chair, Arturo Condo, president of Earth University, for leading the way. Throughout the week, we've heard inspiring ideas from presenters and attendees on partnering to advance the SDGs, climate action, pursuing peace, tackling the challenge of zero hunger, new models of sustainable development, engagement, and thought from university leaders on holistic approaches to addressing the SDGs. Today, we close our gathering with an important conversation. Many of us are part of higher education networks, including UGC. We're working towards progress on the SDGs. Many of us are a part of more than one network. While we approach the SDGs from different perspectives, our high-level goal is the same. How do we better support each other in this work? How do we add to an already robust conversation? How do we share best practices and encourage each of us to move forward? So to start this conversation, I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, who is the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University and the president of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So speaking of networks, I think no one has built one more robust and more effective than he has, and we look forward to hearing from him. By the way, in addition to those roles, he is chair of the Lancet COVID-19 Commission, co-chair of the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition. He's academician of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences in the Vatican, commissioner of the UN, and it's just like had a number of impressive service positions. So it's a unique type of academic that is not only advancing our understanding of complex problems, but also doing whatever he can to make sure those ideas drive real progress. Jeffrey, I want to thank you for your work, but also for the model that you set up and for many of us to follow. We're thrilled to have you with us today, so I'll give you the floor. Oh, I'm afraid you must be muted.
Now I'm unmuted, and
there you go.
I was saying a big thank you to you, Ángel, because we go back a long time in partnerships, and are continuing our long-standing partnerships for the Sustainable Development Goals. And I want to thank you for all your leadership and for the University Global Coalition and all that the UGC should do together with SDSN, because together we're really going to have a very strong reach around the world. And as your whole week has demonstrated, the universities want to lead, have a great deal to contribute, and frankly, we are needed in the world, because governments and business cannot solve these horrifically complex challenges without the academic part added in, the scientists, the policy specialists, the students that make such an enormous difference. I think we understand that as good as the SDGs are, and as crucial as they and the Paris Climate Agreement are, we're not achieving them right now. We're off track globally because we're in multiple crises, and we need to get back on track. And I want to speak about those challenges that are really barriers to effective implementation, and you've been discussing them all week. I want to talk about 6 specific features of this complicated sustainable development agenda that make it exciting, challenging, something different and novel, but also hard, and so hard that we have to redouble our efforts to get to where we want to go. The first point is we are talking about deep transformations of society. For example, decarbonizing the energy system. That's not a simple task. The energy sector is right at the core of the world economy. The fossil fuel-based energy sector was built up over 200 years. It was built up for a reason. It added enormously to economic development and to economic betterment. It happened to have a side effect, which is that carbon dioxide absorbs infrared radiation. Who knew? Certainly not James Watt when he invented the steam engine. So we went down a path that opened up the world economy, but also turned out to create massive side effects. Of course, global warming itself. So we need a deep transformation to a new energy system. Now, we need it within a period of a couple of decades now, partly because we've lost a lot of time since we focused on this topic already 30 years ago in adopting a treaty, the UN Framework Convention. But 20 or 30 years is a very short period of time for a deep transformation at the core of the global economy. And it's a different kind of exercise from what governments normally do. Governments might set the traffic rules, the rules of the game, the laws about how corporations interact or contracts, but the active leadership in the global transformation of the energy system is too hard, I would say, for governments in general, and we've been now at it for a long time and are not quite making it. The core that I would emphasize as the first of these points of transformation is we need a long-term framework. I call this a pathway analysis. It should be a quantitative 2 to 3 decade-long analytical guide for where we are going. Markets can't do it by themselves. Governments don't typically make such pathways, but that's what we need right now. Academics are good at that. We're good at Excel spreadsheets, and we're good at fancier dynamic models, and we need such modeling now. And there are, of course, many pathway analyses of decarbonization that are being produced right now, but I would put this kind of pathway analysis as an analytical novelty of the Sustainable Development Challenge. We need it for the education sector itself. We need it for healthcare transformation. We need it for energy transformation. We need it for farming transformation. We need it for urban infrastructure and transformation. We need it for digitalization of the world economy. 6 major transformations that I count. Again, education, health, energy and industry, a third, land use and agriculture, the fourth, urban infrastructure and digitalization. Each one requires a long-term development framework. Second, this is not something that the magic of the market is able to solve by itself. We can't say too hard for government, therefore business will solve it. This is a multi-stakeholder problem. Nobody has exactly the incentives to get this right, and nobody has the tools in hand by themselves to get this right. Energy transformation requires changes of business practices, it requires changes of technology, it requires changes of land use patterns, it requires changes of regulated industries like the utilities, which tend to be state-owned or heavily state-regulated, and so on. So this is multi-stakeholder. That means more agents around the table than is usually the case. This is not something that can be concocted in the back rooms of Congress and the quarters of power. This is something that requires a deliberative, place-based approach where multi-sector stakeholders are brought together. By the way, universities are great places to convene government, business, civil society, scientists and engineers together around the table. That's one of the great strengths of universities, is the convening power across all these sectors. A third dimension of this transformation is that it is technology-based. There is no low-tech pathway to sustainable development for 8 billion people on the planet. And note that we reach the 8 billion mark next month. And the world population continues to grow at 80 or 85 million a year. We're going to reach 9 billion. Most likely, we're going to reach 10 billion, except in the case of disaster, and I'm not going to go there right now. And that means we need sophisticated systems, sophisticated supply chains, massive distributed global scale supply chains to have the chance to meet the needs for 8 billion plus people on the planet. So that requires a tremendous amount of technical know-how. We need the engineers. In a way, the engineers, even more than the scientists, if I may say so. The scientists give us the framing of how the Earth's physical systems, and more generally, how physical systems work. And the chemistry and the other, the biological systems that are part of our existence, our survival, and our needs. The engineers package that knowledge into usable tools, technologies, know-how. And we really need engineering solutions right now. That's why I have been so keen to help establish a global council of engineers for the energy transition. I went to a lot of meetings with diplomats, but typically the engineers were not there, and the diplomats don't know the engineering. They know about wordsmithing, they know about reaching agreements, but they don't know what the agreement should contain because they don't quite know what is feasible. So the tech side is crucial. A fourth dimension, which is partly where I come into this story, is finance. We cannot solve these problems without trillions of dollars per year of finance. That doesn't have to frighten us because we have a $100 trillion world economy. So a few $1 trillion here and there is a few percent of world output directed towards our survival and our well-being. We can afford this, but still mobilizing and channeling trillions of dollars, much of which needs to go through budgets or through public investments, say government borrowing, is a major challenge. We have set up global institutions like the World Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank or other international financial institutions over the past 60 years to help on this. But the key problem is they operate at a scale that is roughly a tenth of where they should be given what we need. So I'm working with the UN leadership to help promote a tenfold increase in development financing to cover these major transformations. Another key challenge, the fifth that I want to mention, is that almost all solutions for energy or for ecosystems or for smart management of water resources and other Earth system resources are transboundary. By that, I mean they cross national borders. National borders are the result of political history and convention, not ecosystem design, not climate-linked regions. But if we want effective, low-cost, resilient, robust, zero-carbon energy systems, we, even in the United States, can't do it within our own borders. We need to connect with Canada and Mexico in order to get this done. But for smaller countries, it's completely imperative that solutions come at a regional scale. That's true for the 54 countries of sub-Saharan Africa. It's true for the 27 countries of the European Union. It's true for the 10 countries of ASEAN or the 15 countries of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership of the Asia-Pacific region, and so on. Here's a problem. Neighbors often don't get along with each other. They're on different sides of the geopolitical divide. They need to overcome this. In Northeast Asia, there isn't a pro-China, anti-China division that is even imaginable for China, Japan, Korea, and others. Everybody has to be on the same side of this. In Latin America, you can't have the pro-Venezuela side versus the anti-Maduro side. This is unimaginable and such a terrible idea and such a distraction. We need the region working together. And similarly, we cannot have the wars and conflicts that we have with any hope of these solutions in the Black Sea region, by the way, which is a crucial region for mobilizing wind power. But there's a war in the Black Sea right now, and this drains all attention, energy, and feasibility of solutions. So I want to emphasize cross-border cooperation. Be nice to your neighbors. This is the key, and it's extraordinarily important. And it brings me to the final point, SDG 17, global scale partnerships. We are in this together, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. We don't have time for new Cold Wars. We don't have time for global divisions. We don't have time for geopolitical competition between the United States and China, and on and on and on. We urgently need cooperation. We cannot find technical solutions, ecological solutions, or financial solutions if we're at each other's throats. So we need global cooperation. We will have three extremely important meetings now that I think about it, between now and the end of November. Next week is the IMF World Bank meetings, and we are in an incipient global financial crisis. So we need cooperation to avoid a financial meltdown for dozens of countries in the world. Then there will be COP27 hosted by Egypt from roughly November 6th or 7th to the 18th, I believe. And there will then be the G20 meeting, which brings together the 20 large economies, and that's hosted by Indonesia, and will take place in Bali in mid-November. We cannot let these meetings pass without solutions. With the war in Ukraine creating a global danger of utter disaster, massive dislocations of key markets, a breakdown of cooperation, rising financial crisis, we're in trouble. And the way out of this trouble is not to deepen the conflicts, but to overcome them. So the sixth point that I want to emphasize is the Sustainable Development Agenda is an all-in global cooperative agenda. All of this makes these challenges huge, but hey, we're asked to be big thinkers. We're asked to find solutions. We're asked to be creative. We're asked to innovate. And that's why the University Global Coalition is so essential. And I want to thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for the great honor to speak with you today.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey, for making time for us. And honestly, I think your call to action and your 6 points could not be a better really call to form those partnerships. And thank you for highlighting the role that universities can and should play, and for leading the way with one of the most powerful networks of them all. We appreciate your time, and
great to see you.
Look forward to working with you. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Well, that was indeed an absolutely sort of a terrific summary of the challenges that we face, but also highlighting the absolute essential nature of partnerships in addressing them. Most grateful to that. And now I'm equally excited to introduce our panel, where we're going to get into a little bit more detail about how effective partnerships are formed. It is my pleasure to welcome 3 panelists: María Cortés Puch, who is the Vice President of Networks in the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, works with Dr. Sachs. Florencia Librizzi, Sustainability Consultant and Co-Chair of the Higher Education Sustainable Initiative and Program Director of the International Senior Lawyers Project, ISLP. And Gifta Truenu of the Youth Sustainable Development Network. We'd like to give each of the panelists a few minutes to familiarize everybody with their networks that they lead, share some insights. I'll start with Florencia, and then I'll ask Maria and then Gift to follow. So help us understand your work and any insights that you can provide right now. Florencia?
Great. Thank you so much, Ángel. It's a pleasure to reconnect with you. And thank you so much to you, to all of the team of organizers, to invite me for this very exciting event, and be really delightful for me to be part of these conversations, as well as be part of this panel with former colleagues and friends. So I'll just start. I know that we have a few minutes, about 9 minutes, I believe. And so we're going to make a very brief introduction of myself. And then I'd like to share, I would say, divide my presentation in 2 parts. One would be to talk a bit about some of the lessons learned in my work as a co-chair for the United Nations Higher Education for Sustainability Initiative, or HESI, where I had really the pleasure to work very closely with others in partnership. And then I'll save some minutes just to provide some critical perspectives of where we are and why we're not, from my point of view, making real impact on some very important issues, as Professor Jeffrey Sachs stated very clearly when it comes to the SDGs, the climate urgency and crisis and so on, and how partnerships really have a critical role in overcoming those issues. So just very quickly about myself, my name, Florencia Librizzi. I come originally from Argentina, from Cordoba, which is the second city of the country, so country girl. And when I was a teenager, I wanted to work on these issues. I felt compelled that I wanted to, have a role in changing the world. I went to law. I would pick a traditional career, because the idea of ever working at the UN was just too much of a long shot for ever, really, even recognizing that desire. So I work as a lawyer for several years. So I come from the legal side of issues in a way. I believe in accountability in systems that push us in the right direction. I had the pleasure to work on policy issues with the UN Sdsn, with the UN Global Compact, through my academic work and research and teaching, as well as education, leading the SDG Academy and other, like the Prime Initiative. And ultimately, I believe that we need to push more and more ourselves to self-regulatory to really growing our awareness as human beings, becoming better people. I fully believe that we need underlying all of the issues that Professor Jeffrey Sachs pointed out that are absolutely crucial. We need an ethical revolution underneath of it. We need to become better people and better individuals and partner with like-minded people to help us push the bar in the right direction. I don't think any one of us has to be killed or had to be, be excluded, fired, or anything like that, just because, we need to speak up together. We need to partner so we can raise the bar to the right direction. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Like from the spectrum from legal to policy to education and self-regulation. So I'm a mother of 3 kids, 2 twin boys of 5-year-old and a 2-year-old girl. And I just wanted to share a bit about that so you know where I'm coming from and where I kind of bring that perspective. So as I pointed out, I have worked in this space for several years with different institutions, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of these lessons learned with HESI, which were just being seated in a room. I remember in 2019, I was at the Sdsn, working at the Sdsn, and back to my former employer at the UN Global Compact in the boardroom, meeting all of the different networks of higher education, trying to achieve and discuss and just find some common ground to work together and really move the needle to the right direction on the SDGs and elevating higher education. And I remember the sensation was like, this so much frustration and so much of this idea of, oh, we're competing each other. We don't want to step on anyone's toes. We don't want to feel like, like we're resources involved, how we manage this. And, we're still here in competition, right? And we're still feeling that when we are in the moment in which, as Professor Jeffrey Sachs really well explained, we don't have more time. We don't have more resources to spend. We don't have more capacity. I mean, there's really, on this, and while we have this clearly issue of a scarcity in a way, we need to step out from that mindset of scarcity to really see the creatively the endless possibilities within ourselves, with our others around the room and beyond that room, because we need to be more inclusive, and said we need to find a different way. We can continue to do what we're doing. So I remember in that meeting, I was inspired because I felt like we all have different DNA. We all are different, even though we feel that we're competing. We're not. We need to unlock that potential of working together. And we started to work together at SDN as well. We obviously with SDN at HESI. And what we try to do is just not replicate. There are many initiatives, just said, if we're going to work something similar, make sure that we are working with that institution, organization that is already doing that. Let's make sure that we identify together multi-stakeholder strategic initiatives that really are geared to system change. Let's not do anything that we can do by ourselves, that's fine, and we can collaborate. But our work together really needs to elevate to do things that we otherwise couldn't do. Let me give you some examples. We started working with accreditations, with rankings. We started working also on green job education. And now there's a new program that is called Partnership Program that aims to do more coaching and kind of work together with Global North and Global South. I'm kind of tired, and I have said it to many meetings, like this idea of we're transferring knowledge to the Global South. I'm like, no, some of the most innovative, well-rounded, very anchored in community and affordable and, amazing sustainability initiatives. I have also seen them in India, in Latin America. So we're not talking about transferring. We're not talking about, I'm hoping that what we're going to achieve is spaces of true teachability for each of us to really being shared and coming from the place of how can I learn from others. I can kind of make sure that I go back to my, institution and where things better. But one thing to mention there is what we're trying to do here is to bring exactly the different stakeholders to the room, those that are perceived as, competitors, and trying to provide them guidance. For instance, in the case of rating rankings and assessments, we're bringing these agencies, we're having conversations with them, very bold, very honest, very candid, and they're also acknowledging what are the issues and how they can integrate the SDGs, because as we know, the rankings, accreditations oftentimes don't include some of those incentives, and some we're not rating and ranking the way that is helping higher education to become more sustainable and more the type of role that higher education we know that can and should have. So those are some of the examples in terms of bringing the right people in the room, providing the resources that we need, but also being able to work together to elevate our work. For instance, HESI also wanted to do a similar exercise with publishing. We know that many of the publications that are ranked as top don't even reflect enough on the SDGs. So again, that work is being done with the Publishers Global Compact. And again, those are just some examples. I tell you something else that I think I learned from HESI, and I think I learned it even before with Prime, is that we need to make sure that we create system leadership networks. It cannot be top-down, it cannot be bottom-up, it has to be kind of multi-directional, and we need to make sure that we create frameworks that help us align our intention and our purposes, and at the same time help empower and bring ownership to multiple actors, because that's the only way that we're going to produce change. There's nothing, this cannot be in the head of anyone or a couple of people. This is like major action that we need. So I think with Prime was through my first very, humble and like very small feat there. It's not changing, but I helped created these 15 regional chapters around the world, which is still living and thriving. And it really kind of was experiential for me to see the power of the collective and working together. And similarly with Sdsn and with HESI. But again, I think those are some examples. Each of these leaders that they're working on each of these action groups will give you a full presentation about those work streams, and they're very interesting, so you can join. I will not say much than that. I will just share the link afterwards. But I just wanted to reflect my last couple of minutes on this ethical revolution that I think is underneath all of these issues, and I would hate to say I disagree with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, because he's one of my #1, idols. And I believe, of course, that we need more engineers, but I think ultimately we need more leaders in the right sense of ethical, responsible, inclusive. We need that glue. We're not understanding each other. We're seeing war everywhere. How can it be there's so much war? We think ourselves there is war. We think our institutions are war. We're not being able to solve it. We think our countries, we think our societies. We need that glue. We need to become, each of us, better persons, better professionals, better leaders. Whether you're engineer, lawyer, or an economist, I don't care. I think we need to be more coherent and bring that integrity from the why we are doing what we're doing, and we are going to achieve the SDGs. So let's make sure that the why is aligned with the what. What are we doing? With our how many times we're failing in the how we are doing things, in our organizational practices, in our operations, in who are we bringing or not to the table, who are we excluding. With the when, the whom is similar, right? Who is really there? With the when, are we doing this today or in 40 years? Too late. And with where, I think there's a huge responsibility from the global north, from the global south as well, but let's not ask the global south to do things that we're not even there. Let's make sure that we have that coherence. We need that leadership. We need to step up. Those that we are more privileged, those that have the power, all of us, but we need to be aware of our privileges. So a few things then. Notes for each of us, I hope, more self-awareness, which hopefully will grow our love, our compassion, our coherence. Hopefully it's not going to be just compliance. It's going to be more than that, where we can, each of us, give. We need more humility. We need to be more teachable, each of us, and we need to speak truth to power. And let's do that in partnerships. I don't think being sustainable and doing the right thing should be an act of heroism. I think we need to do this together, and we can really elevate everything that we're doing. So let's invite others in the process. Let's work for planetary awakening. It might sound a bit naive, but I believe in that. Let's work on conscious partnerships. And I think we can do this. We need to do better. We can do better, and we must do better. Thank you.
Wow, Florencia, you gave us an inspiring set of ideas. I appreciate it. I appreciate you also bringing your own personal trajectory into the narrative. I'll ask you a few questions later. As someone who actually chaired the effort to create Prime, I would love to hear some of your own experiences within that network. But I'll just leave you with one idea that I think you'll appreciate. We rewrote our mission statement at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a technological university. We produce probably more engineers than anybody else in the U.S. And we do other things, but I guess engineering is at the core of what we do. I'm proud of it. But when we wrote our mission statement, what we ended up with is we develop leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. And I think you're, if I had met you 3 years ago, I think our discussions would have been a lot quicker. But it is much appreciated, Florencia. I look forward to a conversation on some of these ideas later. But before, let me welcome María Cortés, who not only works for one of the most impressive networks in the space, Sdsn, but she's in charge of networks within this network. So María, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Angel, and congratulations on the success of this week. It's been fantastic to hear the first two speakers, former colleague and friend Florencia, with such inspiring ideas. Let me maybe talk briefly about the Sdsn network, and then, like Florencia, I'll share some lessons and some of the challenges that I find in this modus operandi of networks. So Sdsn was established in 2012 under the auspices of the Secretary General of the UN to mobilize scientific and technical expertise in support of the SDGs. We did this by establishing this global network of universities, and very soon after we were established and we started bringing in different universities from different countries, we realized that we needed a sort of intermediate structure, because many of the requests that we were getting from governments, from city officials, from parliamentarians and such, were, we thought, better addressed by academics from that country as opposed to an international group. And so we started establishing these national and regional networks of universities that needed to work with their local governments, with private sector on the ground, with civil society, and so on, achieving the SDGs. I'll tell you an anecdote about, I think it's from 2013, yeah. So less than a year after we were first established, we were launching the Mediterranean Network, and we had about 100 people in the room, a few ministers, presidents of universities from every single one of the countries of the Mediterranean basin, plus experts from the region, civil society members, etc. And Professor Sachs, precisely, was making another very inspirational speech where he was talking about why we needed to work as a network and why we needed this particular Mediterranean SDSN to be successful. And I remember that he said something like, we don't know how this is going to work. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we need to start flying the plane as we build the plane. And I remember that at the time, this was a very shocking and quite humble admission that we were setting up something that we didn't even know how it was going to work, let alone whether if it was going to work. And I think about this statement often, at least every few months I remember it, because I think working in networks is that. is that we have not been trained to work as a network, no? And so we learn as we do. We've been successful, and we now have 1,700 member institutions. I think we cover about 140 countries. We have 50 of these national and regional networks. And really, they have become vibrant, and they're thriving locally and have become sort of the go-to network for the SDGs. So many of our networks have had or have currently a formal mandate from their government to support the strategy to achieve the SDGs, the recovery strategy to be aligned with the SDGs, to support the analysis of what indicators should be used to monitor progress. Our networks are doing phenomenal work on education for sustainable development. They have been doing these long-term pathways that Professor Sachs was referring to, and many solutions in collaboration with the private sector and so. But we're still learning. And we have more successes in some areas than in others. If I were to highlight some of the lessons that we've learned throughout this process, I think the first one has already been mentioned by the three speakers. So Ángel, Florencia, and Jeff have made reference to this, and this the idea that these, as Mariana Mazzucato has called them, these wicked problems need multi-stakeholder partnerships. We've seen it in numerous occasions how if we bring a group of academics together, they may fight. We've seen that too, but there's a high chance that at one point they'll all agree on something, and at the very least on how we're going to resolve this problem. It's very different when you bring the private sector, when you bring governments that have their own agenda, their own timelines, their own modus operandi. But we see that it's when we have everyone in the room that we can deblock some of the things that seem impossible. Some of the problems where we keep trying, we keep proposing solutions, and they bang against this so-called immune system, no, of the system. It's when we have different actors in the room that we find these opportunities to really unblock a situation. So this is one of our first lessons. The second thing that I'll mention is that we've realized that networks are more resilient. So this is a positive lesson, but we've realized this during the pandemic, but even before, we had many hints about this. Networks are fundamentally opportunistic. So they are taking advantage of something that happens, an opportunity of connecting with someone new. They have more flexibility in defining their own program, their own objectives. And as such, they can also adapt faster and more easily to changing circumstances. So during the pandemic, we saw how our network, the first thing is that, of course, they had been working online forever. So this was not a big change. But even though maybe, for example, the focus of health was not a big priority for, say, for example, our Nigerian network, they very quickly adapted to this, found a few experts from Nigeria, a couple of international experts, and started working together online. So I think this is important to remember, and it's an important argument of why networks are crucial. The third thing connects very much with what Florencia was saying. Working in networks is not easy, and we need a certain type of attitude. We need empathy. We need to listen. We need humility. We need to recognize that no one knows how to address this. Jeff made reference to just one of our big challenges, decarbonizing the energy system. But we also have to completely transform our food systems. This is as complex as the one that he outlined. So we don't know how to do this, and we need to be quite humble. And working on a daily basis in networks requires a lot of humility. In terms of challenges, so the first challenge has been clearly outlined, the challenge itself. So sustainable development is huge. And as I was saying, we don't know how to do it. And this is sometimes can be despairing and it can be frustrating. So I think this is one challenge of the kind of networks that we're trying to establish. The second one is working together. Florencia also alluded to this, no? The basic principle is that we are not taught how to work in a collaborative way. Even when we do group work in high school, in university, we tend to do group work on a very defined project by someone above us with a group that is in our bubble. Very rarely are we told, do whatever you want, define yourself, co-create what it is that you're going to be doing, like we say these days, no? And go and meet colleagues from the arts sector, from the engineers, from philosophy, and then identify what it is that you need to do together, and then do it. So we are not taught how to do this, and it's a learning process. Even the model of leadership that networks require is very different from the traditional model of leadership that we always learn about. No, leadership in networks tend to be more horizontal. There's moments where someone shines and moments where someone else takes the lead and pushes through. The last thing, and perhaps this is the most important for the specific questions of networks and the challenges that they face, is that the world is not prepared. So I go to meetings, I meet government officials, the private sector, the European Commission, and all sorts of bodies, and I always hear multi-stakeholder partnerships. Great, but the reality is that the funding is not accompanying networks. So we are still supporting projects. We're not supporting the institutional infrastructure that networks are, and we need that. We need funding for networks. The incentives, the legislations, these are not prepared and are not set up to sustain and to support networks, and we need that to change. We need to creatively think together about how that needs to change, because honestly, there are so many networks of volunteers, but this is not sustainable in itself. So this is a huge challenge. I'm going to conclude just by saying that in 10 years in Sdsn, in charge of this program, as I say, it's challenging. We're learning every day, and it's been an adventure. But I think that when networks work, when we unblock a tremendously complex situation, when we see something like that emerge and happen, it is so powerful and it's so impactful. And frankly, it's also far more fun than working in the more traditional way with your colleagues in one little project that touches upon one discipline. I'll stop here.
Gracias, Maria. Thank you so much, and thank you also for, again, not just adding some fascinating insights as to how we should learn to run effective networks, but also do it with such contagious passion. Much appreciated. Looking forward to our conversation in a minute. But before that, let us switch to Gift, and to hear also what it is we can and should learn from your own experiences with the Youth Sustainable Development Network.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you're in the world. And thank you very much to all of the speakers, who have actually spoken. Everything everybody on this call has said today is just wonderful. And while every speaker was actually on speaking, I was thinking to myself and I was saying, wow, this is just so much. And really, you've said it all. That's the honest truth. However, I'll take it from the standpoint of, where I am, my experience. I'm pretty much new into this. Okay, so basically, my journey actually started with the Sustainable Development Network in 2021, which was last year. Prior to then, I was a Millennium Fellow. For the Millennium Fellowship. I became a Millennium Fellow in 2020, where I'm pretty much very passionate about SDG 2, which is zero hunger. And I wanted to, advance the SDG in my community. I'm an undergraduate student of Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Ogun State, Nigeria. So basically, I wanted to really change the narrative of how, the SDGs have been advanced in my community. And I thought to myself, as a Millennium Fellow, I had to work all by myself because a few individuals in my university were pretty much were less informed about, what the SDGs are, and most importantly, the major issue was a lot of them had an idea of what the SDGs were, but the issue was, they don't understand how to possibly grow from, okay, I want to advance this particular SDG. How do I go from, doing it in the broader sense? What networks are available to join and all of these basic things? Because the truth is, you cannot go too far by doing it all by yourself. The SDG is very broad, it's very, very big. And for you to cover more ground, you need to be part of a network. So that is exactly how it started for me. And, fast forward to 2021, I became a member of staff for the Youth Sustainable Development. So basically, the Youth Sustainable Development Network is a youth-led organization, which is primarily focused on, education and most importantly, advancing the SDGs amongst youth. And this is the core of what we do. So I would actually start by talking about, our challenges. So basically, as a youth network, one of those issues we have as a youth network is the fact that, one, we have very little hands who are actually doing the work we do in this part of our community. And because we are very little, the truth is we struggle pretty much with finances as regard how do we go around operation, how do we get a lot of people. And the previous speaker before myself has said it all as regard finances. The truth is there's only little we can do with having people volunteer for a cause. Even if, we have a couple of people volunteer, it's not sustainable enough to run the system. It's not sustainable enough to run, with the initiative, the various projects we want to, implement in our various communities. Hence, it's a major limitation for youth-led organization like ours. And, besides that, I want to talk about, one of the successes we've also had in the last couple of years as well. Because our organization is one that is pretty much passionate about educating the youth in our community about the Sustainable Development Goals and also implementation, we believe that everybody is actually talking from different systems, the high stake down to the very lowest one. Like one of our previous speakers actually said, she said, leadership shouldn't be a thing of bottom to top or top to bottom. Actually, the truth is, if we all see these various goals as something that, because it is an issue that it concerns everybody. It's not for a particular class of people. It's not just for the government to fix. It's not just for businesses to fix. It concerns everybody. And like Professor Jefferson said, he has said it all of the issues. So I really don't want to talk about the issues because every speaker and the panelists before myself has said that. However, I want to really lay emphasis on the fact that also we as youth, we are very, very much needed in this, in this journey. The truth is because statistics actually shows that in Nigeria, over 70% of the population are actually youth, between 18 to 25. In Africa, generally, over 60% of the population are actually youth. What it means is it is high time we begin to involve, youth in the journey of how do we go about really solving the issues of the Sustainable Development Goals generally. Because in the next 10 to 20 years, the truth is the youth are actually going to be core. The youth are actually going to be in the forefront of, what's going on in the world. So it's actually very important that we have the youth also, in the system of, education. And the truth is, I would say this with all humility. Everybody has spoken on this call. I feel very, very much humble because you've said it all. I'm literally much more like, what exactly is it I want to say? You've all said everything. But my point of this major discussion is that it's actually high time we need to take, we need to take everything we're doing as regards to Sustainable Development Goals alongside with the youth, because the truth is, if the youth are left behind, we should begin to ask ourselves questions like, what would happen in the next 10, 20 years? Everybody is actually growing old, and the youth are actually growing older to also become the leaders of tomorrow. So if we call ourselves the leaders of tomorrow, it's high time we begin to, learn from the people who are ahead, learn from their experiences, get more knowledge from all that they've done, and also take it up from there. And most importantly, position ourselves to achieving the very best we can. So basically, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Gift, and thank you for emphasizing the absolute necessity that we involve the youth of the world in this process. Much appreciated. So I think if anything emerges from this conversation is how both necessary and at the same time incredibly complex partnerships are, and I want us to maybe think in terms of if we want to create a little bit of hope and optimism, and maybe I wonder if you can sort of search among your recent Maria, you talked about how incredibly exciting it is when it works, right? And if you can look in your past experience and maybe highlight a couple of cases as concrete as you can be, right, in terms of where it works. I mean, Florencia, I mean, with Prime, I remember, I mean, we started off with probably the hardest part of academia, right? Maybe the part that culturally was farther removed from sustainable development, which is the culture of the business school. And here we are years later with hundreds and hundreds of business schools engaged, and tons of champions in business schools now empowered to speaking up. And so whether it's Prime or anything else you choose, but I would love to hear from you. Give us examples of when partnerships actually worked, and maybe deconstruct what is it we can learn from it. And I don't know, maybe I'll start with Florencia, but any of you who would like to take on this question.
Thank you, Ángel, and it's great to know that that you remember those days and those conversations some years ago. I also see Arturo Condo connected, which I also remember from the Prime teams times. Yeah, I mean, at Prime I learned so much, because I remember when I joined the team, it was, and one of the reasons why I joined that team, I felt that it was for those who don't know, the Principle for Responsible Management Education is a sister daughter. There was a bit of I remember I was pushing for it. Let's try to define that of the UN Global Compact that had a similar structure of the UN Global Compact, meaning the same kind of thematic networks were not there yet, which that was my role to come and form. But basically had the same structure of the Global Compact, but it was tiny. And really trying to address one of the main issues that, as you said, Ángel, is how we bring together business schools, which are in so many ways teaching many theories that are kind of like not really conducive to sustainable development on board, to make the change in mindset, in knowledge, in skill sets that we need to form those leaders for, I don't even say tomorrow, for today, for right now. So when I came on board, as I said, it was a very tiny team. It was like 2 people in the team. And I joined thinking, I love, creating things, creating with others. And I see all of this potential of what can be done. And I brought my kind of, I feel like I'm a lawyer, but I'm a kind of like an architecture in a way. Like I like frameworks, and my father's an engineer. And I don't know, but also, coming from the global South, I learned, kind of economy. I mean, in Argentina, if like everything. So I like to create things, try to be effective and affordable, and just say, well, how can we, ultimately the pleasure for me is to create with others. And we created these chapters. Basically, it was no chapters when I joined. And, it was everything about putting an agreed upon framework that will help us to bring that alignment in purpose, but then will really give the flexibility so people could feel ownership and could take, a role and step up. And just like, I was hearing from Kathleen NG that I wanted to mention, one of the leaders, in HESI, I mean, like really people that are willing to volunteer or, and just say like, I'm going to do this and take the leadership role. So for me, the process of creating these first 15 chapters around the world was really a lot about listening, as Maria said, a lot about going there and just learning from them and understanding that, yes, we might have a global agenda, but the context, rules, and we need to understand what are those issues and how this translates into the specific context and region. Being able to facilitate. So yes, we might have a lot of ideas in our mind, and we need to know when we bring them up, or when we kind of, we're a bit more on the driver. It has to be a conversation, and you need to know when you need to, like really facilitate that conversation and see, okay, where we are, and oftentimes was a bit of mediation role, like trying to bring everyone in the same place and moderating those discussions from that place of humility. No one has it, the understanding of everything. Understanding also, for me, the other is always a teacher in a way, because I feel like I'm always trying to think, okay, what is that I don't know, right? I mean, I know what I know where I thrive, I know what I, master. I know some things that I can learn and I should learn, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And that is exactly where we're stuck, because there's nothing else, So just really working together and being able to complement from the skill set, from the mindset, from everything that we bring on the table, from the appreciation of the other. So I know that my what I'm saying sounds a lot on the social aspect of sustainability, which of course I feel it very strongly, but also because I truly believe that some of the things that are really where we are really lacking in is that we are really leaving many people behind, and we are, ultimately we're missing on the connection with others and with the earth, right? And that's what partnership would really do, is connecting us. So I'll just stop right there. I hope that I answered your question, Angel.
Well, that was very good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria. What would you maybe what cases would you highlight and learnings?
Angel, I'm going to start with just one thought, because you said give us some examples, because you've given a lot of information about the challenges. So just to change a bit the mindset, I think the pandemic has changed us all. And in one of the ways that it has changed that is that we've become more flexible. We've all had to adapt. And so I think right now is a very good moment for establishing partnerships that can be successful, because we've all learned how to adapt a lot over the last 2 years, and learned how to okay, not do that, but maybe do this other thing, which is also great. And universities are one of the institutions that have adapted the most, and they've done it very successfully. We hosted 4 meetings of university presidents by regions the last 12 months, and we had over 100 presidents of universities. And one of the conclusions of these meetings were, wow, they've done so much, and they're doing, and they want to do more. Many of these leaders had, I think, been provoked, because Ángel, you've been in this, and I think you've been a pioneer, but there are many others that had been sort of provoked by the pandemic and thought, actually, we can do change, we can do a drastic change. So what else could we be doing? So with that thought aside, so one of the programs that connects with several of the issues that Jeff mentioned at the beginning was the Deep Decarbonization Pathway project. So this was a big consortium of researchers from different countries that were working to establish models for decarbonizing their economies. And I think what's interesting of this example is that the objective was very ambitious. We were working with IDRI as a partner, but then all of these local teams were really based in different institutions. They had to learn the modeling techniques, but then they had to adapt it to their local context. And in some cases, there were political nuances that were very drastic, because in certain, I won't mention which countries, but in certain countries, at one point, I remember the researchers were even worried about whether this could put them in a complicated situation with their government. I think what was so at the end, these countries brought up these pathways. So these were developed, and they were developed also to be adapted to their context. So, for example, the German pathway did not include nuclear as an option, because this was the time where already Germany had decided to phase out of nuclear energy, etc. What was most interesting, in my opinion, of this project was that the modeler teams learned from each other throughout the project. So they were bringing to monthly or every 2 months calls ideas of how they were resolving problems. and they were learning from each other, and they were adapting their models. Some of this adaptation came also from working with civil society. So some of the proposals that the model made were completely unfeasible at the social level. And so I think this is a very good example of something that went from start to finish, that produced a very ambitious output, and that was done through teams that were working with the private sector, but conducting complex models, and then also adapting to social realities and sharing it at the global level. Let me just say one last thing, and it's what Florencia says. I think for networks to work, the body of facilitation is key. And I think in this project, it was very important. We had a phenomenal colleague that led the whole process through, and I think that this is always very important.
Terrific. Thank you, Maria. And Gift, hopefully, you represent the hope, the future. We talked about, I think it was Florencia who talked about how university may not necessarily prepare us to partner and build networks and collaborate. But what's your approach? I mean, what have you seen that has the biggest, most effective impact in our youth?
Hello, Angel, please, could you come again? I didn't get that.
Yeah, no, we've been talking about how working in partnerships and in networks may not be obvious. We may not be even trained and educated and programmed to do it effectively. And you work directly with youth. You're helping them build networks and build effective networks. If you can highlight things that you guys do that you find to be very effective in empowering youth.
Okay, thank you very much, Angel. So basically for YSDN, one of our flagship projects is called Youth Sustainability Conference. This is a conference we hold annually where we, partner with different, individuals and vice stakeholders, experts from different fields, where they come together to speak on, this contemporary issues around, sustainable development and how we can possibly fine-tune solutions that are sustainable and then implement them in our various community on the grassroots level. So basically, for me, this working in my network I feel with the network, it's pretty much easy because, it gives us, it's a leverage point for me to leverage. I feel with the network, we're able to really reach far than, if maybe working on a project as an individual, or if I was singly trying to deal with a particular issue. So for me, networks I call them leverage points because, it helps you reach far. It helps you connect with other people who actually share the same, visions with you, who possibly are doing the work around the SDGs that possibly aligns with yours. So for me, the impact is the fact that it helps us partner with people who are doing the work that we're doing, maybe in different ways. And it also gives us a grant to learn from one another, to learn from different points of view. And also it helps us incorporate and also further, strengthen our models. If we're doing things in a certain way, partnership, it actually enables us to do it much more better. If we're doing things in a certain way, it helps us do it much better. So I feel network is just a point of leverage where you are able to improve whatever it is you're doing, especially when you're working with, a partner who is doing the work you do in a different way. So it just helps you fine tune and also work better, in doing what you do. So basically, that's all I have to say, Angel. Thank you.
Thank you, Gift. A couple of you, I think both Florencia and Maria maybe have talked about also differentiating. On one hand, you would want to have, maybe I think it was Florencia that on one hand, you would hope that these different networks would find a unique space, something instead of overlapping. But on the other hand, we've talked about how the power of networks is that they are flexible, they're adaptive, and by necessity, I think there might be overlaps and coincidences in certain space. Help us maybe dig a little bit deeper into what you've seen, what we ought to. I mean, we even at the University Global Coalition, we're constantly talking about what is the space that we can add the most value, that may not be perhaps being served by other existing groups. So anything that you can share with us that might be useful for selfishly for UGC, but probably for most of everybody on this call.
I'm happy
Hello,
to.
can you hear me?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go on, please. Go on, please.
Florencia, you have the floor.
Happy to start. Yeah, sure. Happy to start with some ideas there. I'm sure that Maria and Gift will, further elaborate as well. So I think, I guess it's related to one of the points that I was trying to make, perhaps not very successfully, but, I think, each institution, each individual, each organization is different by creation, by DNA. That's how I believe. Of course, we want to be efficient, we want to be effective with our resources, and ideally we're not going to be replicating and duplicating work. But I think, and of course, each organization, and within their theory of change and this and strategy and so on, can find that space, right? And Ángel, as you were pointed out, like where is the place that we best contribute and we have the most impact. Where I think partnership become absolutely evident, and I think partnerships have so many different in the spectrum ways in which improve the way that we operate. And Gift was mentioning one of them, right? We typically, when we work with others, we refine our products. The creation of our work is better. The network of reach is larger. So there are many angles to it. But I think when they become absolutely essential, which is related to the point that Professor Jeffrey Sachs was mentioning, there's some things that we cannot even grasp unless we're in a partnership, right? And I think from my experience, when it comes to higher education and SDGs network in particularly, and then that's why I relate back to HESI, is because I think, Prime, Sdsn, and with UGC, I would love to kind of learn more, and I think we can correspond after. Potentially we can say perhaps they have kind of their own space, although there's some overlap. But I think what I was most interested in HESI was I want to make sure that we don't get into what we're doing already, that probably like each of the organizations are doing right. Either we collaborate if we can join forces and support one of those networks. But what I wanted to do is identify new things that no one is doing or is not doing, because we need that leverage power that Gift was saying as a network, as a platform, as multiple partnerships, right? Which those were kind of the examples of accreditation. It's not the same that one institution goes and said, I think you should integrate this and that into, your accreditations, rankings, even with journals, that have a, require an extra effort of a sectoral also, of a sector of an industry, and just bring them all together. And you can have that convening power because you're saying all of these networks under the umbrella of HESI, we're joining here to tell you that we want to have a conversation with you, hear your perspective, hear where you are in this issue. What are the challenges that you're experiencing integrating the SDGs into, for instance, rankings? How can we help you? And listen from your peers, and how we all together, because we believe that we have the same intention, and that's what we have heard, right, can elevate together that sector, right? So I think that's where partnerships are absolutely crucial, and I am in total belief that, that's just even a small example compared to the critical global issues that we're experiencing that, that put us in risk of survival, right? Like the environmental issues and peace and security and many more.
Thank you. Any thoughts, Maria, around this issue of also differentiation? Yeah.
I mean, I think so. I basically agree with Florencia. So I think in terms of duplication, the risk is that we have limited resources, that we have limited attention and limited time. So there's a risk that this gets broken down into smaller and smaller pieces, as opposed to the magnitudes that we need to use. And in that sense, I think the conclusion is that we need to work together. A certain level of overlap is probably healthy, because I think, in systems thinking, you always want a certain level of duplication so that the system can survive shocks, no? But I think what is dramatic is if we're doing the same, because then we're probably doing it at the wrong scale, we're probably dividing funds and so. Where I think Florencia really hit the nail is that when we think about collaborating across networks, so no longer within our network, this sector, that other, and so, but across networks, the best use of our time, in my opinion, and I think this is what Florencia was referring to, is identifying those projects that we cannot do by ourselves. So what is it that SDSN can do? Fine, but what is it that we cannot do? What do we need other partners? We've identified a couple of these. So with the university, the Commonwealth, the University Association, so we've worked with other associations in very specific areas where we've identified, no, we would be far, our reach, our impact, our capacity to transform would be the right if we do it together. And we sometimes don't spend enough time thinking that through. And this is what we should be focusing. What is it from what we're doing where we feel limited, where we could do much more with other networks joining forces? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, terrific. And so let me ask each of you, I mean, you just to take 1 minute. And give us your call to action, maybe your ideas on how to engage from your standpoint. What is your parting thoughts for this group? Gift, let's start with you. What's your call to action? How can people engage with the Youth Sustainable Development Network? Where do we go for more information? What is it you would like everybody on this call to know and do?
Okay, thank you very much, Angel. So basically, the best way to engage with the Youth Sustainable Development Network is we're actually on various social media platforms. We're on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, just connect with us with Youth Sustainable Development Network on LinkedIn. You get all you need to get from there. From there, you can access our website to see our work and what we are doing as well. And yeah, so basically, I feel like the Youth Sustainable Development Network is one that is, on a mission to put youth across the world, at the forefront of sustainable development. So I feel like, yes, it's just high time we begin to actively engage as youth in this cause of, creating a better world for ourselves. Thank you.
Maria.
So institutions can become members of SDSN. It's I can put the link in the chat, and then not just the institution, but the professors of the institution can be a part of our network, our projects, and so. My parting thought, because we are talking mostly in the university sector, is what I said before. I think there is a lot of thirst right now in the higher education sector to do more. They've proved that they can adapt and do phenomenal things when it's necessary, and I think this is a great time to capitalize on that. So. Through SDSN, through the University Global Coalition, with both of us, under HESI, all of these are configurations that are great. And as following up on Florencia's thought, and as one professor from our network repeats a lot, a former colleague of you, Ángel, Carlos Mataix, let's move from this ecosystem to an ecosystem, no? of working together.
Oh, that's a great phrase indeed. Thank you so much, Maria. Florencia, you have the last word of the panel.
What is such a responsibility. Thank you so much, Maria. I mean, like what you just said, it just remind me, like, I always love so much working with Maria, and it's such a critical thing. We are working on the same, we have the same mission, basically. We want to change the world. There's all of these issues that we have no more, time or resources to waste in any way. So I think again, I think we need to make sure that whatever time or energy we put this is in the right way. Otherwise, it's just a loss. So I think when it comes to HESI particularly, I just want to shout out to Kathleen, and she's posting a lot of links out there. HESI, you can join, you can be part of the action groups. There are many webinars, this partner program to integrate the SDGs into teaching and research and so on, and that community. I think you can be part of all of that. I think that any organization brings different values, and so you need to find the network or the networks that help you. But ultimately, I want to keep that spirit that we're all in the same boat, and I think we should. I same what Maria was saying, we think we're being in kind of gravitating in the same point of like, we all need to be working together. And I hope that from this meeting, we can, have a debrief meeting perhaps, and like action plans, the next steps of what are those tipping points? What are those things that we cannot do otherwise, by ourselves? And let's make sure that we get to do that together. So it's been a pleasure. And of course, my final call also is that awakening of the world. I think, let's continue to work on ourselves, on our self-awareness. We can do a much better humanity. I know. And so thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to connect and reconnect with all of you. And thank you so much for all what you're doing, which is very much needed.
Thank you, Florencia. And I like your idea of an ethical revolution. And in fact, a reminder that one of the most important things we should do at universities is not just so much to help people learn and acquire knowledge, but also to shape their values and the views of the world and create a confidence for action. And I think all of you are working on that, and I could not be more grateful for this fantastic closing panel. I hope Florencia, Maria, and with Drew and others, I hope we can have maybe a meeting aside to keep brainstorming as to how we can do what we do better. And I love that word from Maria, that we need to move from ecosystems to ecosystems, and I think that encapsulates the spirit of this conversation. So now we'll close our annual gathering here, but please look out for follow-up information and ways to engage. Even just the exchange on the chat today was extraordinary, amazing amount of information, insights, and links. We also appreciate if you can take the survey that was linked in the chat to help inform future events. Thanks again to our panelists, to the audience, to every participant during the conference, and of course to the committee and the organizers. It takes a village, it takes a community to bring an event like this to life. I appreciate the contributions of everyone. And now let's get to work. The challenges, as Professor Sachs mentioned earlier, are pretty significant and awaiting all of our creative efforts. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Ángel, and congratulations on the success.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.